Hey, good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Thanks for giving me a few minutes of your very valuable time as we spend some time talking about parts of the Bible. I have got my cup of coffee. That's why we call it Coffee with PC today. Thanks to Cindy Smith, some straight from Colombia. Juan Valdez himself, Colombian coffee. She found this and shared it. I'm grateful, so I'm drinking some of that. It's got a nice flavor to it. Enjoying it this morning, enjoying the last of my third cup of coffee today, spending these few minutes with you. We've been going through Matthew's account of the life of Jesus. As I've said before, it's becoming probably one of my favorite. John was probably always my favorite. The more I've spent in Matthew, I'm kind of getting into parts of it in a way. And what I love and a conviction of mine that's really coming home to me lately is how important it is to see parts of the Bible kind of in context. You know, we know so much of the Bible. If you've been around church, I've been around church my whole life. Maybe some of you have too. Maybe some of you are newer to church. Either way, we usually think of the Bible, we grab pieces of it. We know this story or that story or the other story. But when you do what we've been doing for months now, kind of a week at a time, a section at a time, going through a book like Matthew and looking at it, you can see at times some of the important ways that the text fits together and how parts of it inform what comes next. And I think we really see that. At least it jumped out to me as I'm talking about today, this particular part. We're in Matthew chapter 17, the first couple of verses we're going to look at together. And it's a well-known moment in the life of Jesus. We often call this the Transfiguration. When we read it in just a minute, you'll see why. Because in this moment, Jesus is transfigured before some of his disciples. In fact, rather than me describe it, let me just read the first 3 verses of Matthew 17. If you're not familiar with it, or even if you are, to remind us of what's happening in this moment. It says this: After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up to a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. What an incredible moment that must have been. As I said, it's one that's well known from the life of Jesus. In fact, if you're to go to the Holy Land, to Israel, there's the Mount of Transfiguration. I didn't get to tour it when we went, but we kind of saw it off in the distance there. That's called the Mount of Transfiguration. And you see Jesus has this intimate moment with kind of what we often think of as the inner circle of his disciples. He's got 12 disciples, but Peter, James, and John, at times, he pulls apart from the rest, and they have moments like this that are unique and intimate with Jesus. And boy, what a moment this is, because there they go up to this mountain and they see something that must have been incredible, mind-blowing even. They see Jesus, the transfiguration is what we use, that his face shines like the sun and his robes become as white as light. So you've got this moment where the glory of Jesus, almost like the Jesus, the Son of God, God the Son, the second person of the Trinity, they see in this moment a little bit of that glory that he had before he was incarnated and was born and lived on earth. And not only that, but some of their heroes, 2 of the great heroes of the Jewish people and the Jewish Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament as we often call it, Moses and Elijah appear there, and they're talking with Jesus. I mean, if you're Peter, James, and John, this is an experience like nothing else you couldn't even imagine that this would be your experience. And yet here they are seeing this. And this is where I think it's interesting and important that we connect it, because notice the text says, the first part of this says, after 6 days. So what have we looked at for the last few weeks? What happened less than a week ago? 6 days ago, what's going on? Peter confesses that Jesus is the Messiah. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And in this moment, Peter sees with his own eyes that his confession is absolutely true. Not only does he see it, but a few verses later, it tells us that a bright cloud envelops him, verse 5, and a voice from the cloud, the voice of God, says, "This is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." Peter's confession, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, this moment confirms your confession is exactly right. But not only was there that confession, what we've talked about even just last week is what Jesus had told them. He had told them, 2 weeks ago, we said Jesus shared the news that Peter didn't really like, that he was going to go to Jerusalem and he was going to have to suffer and he was going to die and rise again. And Peter says, no, I'm never going to let that happen to you. It's kind of a famous encounter. He rebukes Jesus for saying that. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. We talked about that a few weeks ago. And then last week, we talked about then after saying that, Jesus tells his disciples, if anyone would follow me, they must deny themselves, take up their cross, and then follow me. So Jesus tells his disciples 6 days before this, listen, to follow me is going to be costly because it's going to cost Jesus personally his own life, his death on the cross, but it's also going to cost his followers. They're going to deny themselves, take up the cross, a life of obedience and self-sacrifice, of laying down their rights to follow Jesus. It doesn't sound like an invitation to, hey, it's going to be great. It sounds like an invitation to, there might be times following Jesus is going to be difficult and costly. And while maybe even that, those words are in their mind and they're dealing with what that means and how that might look and how Jesus, what this experience is going to be. Peter, James, and John, Peter, one of them that rebukes Jesus, sees this vision of the glory of God revealed, the glory of Jesus revealed. And I think that's so important because, look, this is what we need sometimes, right? Because as we think about what it means in our lives today, if you're a follower of Jesus, a Christian, a disciple, we use a lot of words. If you're following Jesus to mean the same thing, if that's what you're doing, you know, in our world today, it's not always easy. We live in a world with lots of difficulty, and to be a follower of Christ sometimes is difficult. And not only that, but to live in this world, follower of Christ or not, is full of difficult experiences. There is pain, there is suffering, there is struggle in this life for everybody. And here, this moment, for those of us who do follow Jesus, who look to him as our example, as our Messiah, as our Savior, we are shown just a little glimpse of the beauty that awaits, the reward that awaits. In fact, part of what we didn't talk about at the end of chapter 16, after he says, to follow me, take up your cross, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. He talks about whoever loses their life for my sake. But then he says at the end of that chapter that for the Son of Man is going to come into his Father's glory and his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what he has done. We've been promised that even though following Jesus could be costly, there's a great reward. And as we're going through this life, and there is struggle and suffering and difficulty, we might think, is it worth it? And Jesus gives us this glimpse. He gave his disciples this glimpse. What you're about to face, what's going to happen just a few chapters from now when things get really hard. Listen, remember this moment. This is a foretaste, a little taste of the hope that you have. The hope that we have is the same. Because one day what we believe is in God's eternal kingdom, we will be in a kingdom where there is no more. Revelation 21, the next to the last chapter in all the Bible, there's no more death or mourning or crying or pain. All that we struggle with, all of that's going to go away. And then in chapter 22, the last chapter in all of the scriptures, we're told that when we're in that eternal kingdom, we will see his face, meaning Jesus's face. I think just like Peter, James, and John got to see, not the earthly Jesus, but the glorified Jesus and all of his glory, having suffered for us and having provided for our salvation. In that eternal kingdom, we get to see with our own eyes and experience all of this reward, all of this hope that we have. In fact, what we often call it is the Christian hope. We have an already salvation because we've been forgiven and adopted as his children and promised his presence with us. But we have a not yet salvation, a one day when his kingdom is established, when he returns and sets right every wrong. That hope that we have is what we look forward to, that helps us get through the struggle that is sometimes the reality of this life. Peter, James, and John, they got to taste it. They got to see it with their own eyes. We're privileged that this is recorded as a reminder to us because, sometimes following Jesus in that moment of struggle, in that difficulty, in that sacrifice that we're called for, in that obedient sacrifice we're called to make, think, is it worth it? We just have to remember this taste that Peter, James, and John got of the eternal, resurrected, glorified Jesus that awaits us, who we will see his face in that eternal kingdom where there's no more of the stuff that we want to, end, and it will end one day. The promise of eternity. This glimpse of the transfiguration, I think, is just that. And again, I just love that it comes right on the heels of a very probably a sobering moment for his disciples to be reminded what it will mean for them to follow him, to start what we call the church from the day of Pentecost that grows and prospers throughout history so that it still exists today. What it cost them, he said, listen, here's your glimpse of why you're doing it and who is your Lord and what awaits you, that one day you're going to see me face to face. I hope, pardon the redundancy, I hope you have that hope. I hope you've seen in Jesus the call that he has placed on your life to follow him, recognizing that, yes, at times it is a denial of self and it's a taking up a cross to follow him, but it's also a promise of great hope, great reward, being in his presence. No more crying, no more mourning, no more pain, for this old order of things has passed away. That's what awaits us. That's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I want everybody to know, and that helps sustain us to live our lives for him, knowing that he has something amazing, unimaginable waiting for us who place our faith in him, who follow him with all of our lives. If you want to know more, as we always say, we'd love to have you join us. We're in Matthew on Sunday mornings, the Sermon on the Mount. We're going through Matthew 5, 6, and 7, helping us understand Jesus' message about his kingdom and what that means. Love to have you join us to learn more about this. Or even if you have a question, you want to drop us a line, say, hey, I want to know more about Jesus. I want to know what it means to place my faith in him. I want to know what it means to follow him. Please take advantage. Do that. Drop me an email. I usually attach this. You can message us if you're watching on Facebook, or if you're on our website, you can email me personally, and I'd love to have that conversation with you, set up a time to talk about it. And certainly if you're here on a Sunday, maybe after the service, just pull me aside. That's what we exist as a church to do, to share the hope that we have, the promises that Jesus made and makes come true one day. We want you to know that hope. We want you to know him. So join us sometime and learn more about what it means to follow him. All right. Well, I got a sip of coffee left. I got a lot left to do today. I'm sure you have plenty on your agenda, so I'm going to let you get back to it, and I'm going to get back to it. Thanks for spending these few minutes with me, and I hope you have a great Wednesday.